Hello friends, today I have another little bit of a ramble to get off my chest, and this ramble is going to be closely related to my last ramble, which was on eclecticism within modern paganism and the idea of being Wiccanesque and my thoughts on that. And this one is going to be more about conceptions of deity within modern paganism and how we define pagan belief and pagan ideas and philosophies. And so I'll be talking a little bit about the various different isms and just some of my thoughts. I mentioned in my last video that I am quite Wiccanesque in my practice, even though I don't actually identify as Wiccan, and as well as the different enjoying the sabbats and pagan festivals and circle casting and the different Wiccan tools and that kind of thing that I enjoy within my practice. Another thing that I do quite closely identify with in Wicca is the idea of having the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, or a goddess and god which is balanced. And that's just something that has appealed to me since I was a young teenager. At that time I kind of wasn't really aware of some of the issues that we have today surrounding gender, or even back then, like I grew up in a small town, so there wasn't I didn't actually know anyone who was transgendered or anything like that, and I am privileged in the sense that I am a heterosexual person, and I also am cisgendered. Like, I'm a female who's quite comfortable identifying as a woman. I'm not sort of super girly all the time. As you can see in some of my videos, I do put on a bit of makeup and I scrub up all right, and other times it's just frumpy McFrumperson. It's just the way it is. And I'm not extremely tomboyish either, so I'm just quite comfortable identifying as a woman, and I'm also just comfortable identifying as a person and a human being as well. And I kind of wasn't aware of those kind of issues growing up, and the idea of a pagan religion where we saw the divine as feminine and also masculine was really appealing to me. And I think it was because of my Christian upbringing. Within Christianity you kind of have this idea of the sacred masculine only, and then that's the umbrella under which you have the femininity and masculinity of humans, and then women are kind of seen as subservient and inferior in some ways, I guess. And so it was kind of just a little bit of an antidote to that, and felt more balanced to me, and I enjoyed it. And I still do in a lot of ways, although I can see how, I guess I am a soft polytheist, because I do believe in that, idea of monism, where you have the all, or the source, or that kind of thing, and then under that you have the different deities, including the goddess and god of Wicca. So that's kind of my philosophy in that kind of broad sense. I know for a lot of people they're not comfortable with that, and I think that's perfectly okay. I don't think everybody has to follow both the goddess and the god, or a goddess and patron god and matron goddess, or what have you. I think some people only want to associate with the sacred feminine, or only with the sacred masculine, and our gods aren't jealous. The Christian God may be jealous and tell us not to worship idols, and that he's the one and only true God and that kind of thing, but our gods aren't like that. They, the goddess doesn't really care if you don't worship her, really. I mean, I think she wants to be respected, and Mother Nature wants our care and attention and respect, but she doesn't need our worship. So that's just kind of how I feel. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about, pantheism and animism. So I watched a really great video a long time ago now by Anya Auger, and she does a lot of great videos on her channel talking about some of her thoughts on pantheism. And in one video she was kind of talking about how, as a pantheist who sees the all as everything as divine and sacred, it can sometimes be hard when you see things and people and what have you that you don't like, and trying to fit that into the idea of everything being divine, because it can be hard when you come across people you don't like. Or the example that she pointed out was landfills, and you know, there's some horrible things that go on, like things getting chucked out that shouldn't be thrown out, that should be recycled, and just the environmental damage that it's doing. And it can be really, really hard as somebody who sees everything as sacred and divine to see the good and the inherent divinity within something like that. So that's a real struggle that I think a lot of pantheists do struggle with. And I could just relate to that 100%. And I was totally picking up what she was putting down in that video. So I'll link to that one below if you're interested. And yeah, so I am quite pantheistic, as well as being a soft polytheist, I guess. And yeah, I can relate to that, although I do have those challenges and struggles on that intellectual level, as Anya was saying. So yeah, and animism, I guess, is just that thought that everything has a spirit, even something inanimate like this paperclip. This paperclip has a spirit. Yeah, and that ties in with a lot of the discussion that's going on at the moment with tools. So, you know, our tools having that inherent spirit and divine energy within them, just like everything. So that's really cool as well, and I think that's interesting. And, you know, I think most pagans do appreciate and understand that there's no right and wrong within pagan belief structures. There's really only what's right for the individual, and it's a matter of preference more so than right and wrong. You know, there's no one and only right and true paganism. You know, that's the ideas that come from other religions, not from us. You know, we don't need to tell other people that the way that they believe is wrong. We can have that understanding that something can be true for us, and then another thing can be true for somebody else, and that's okay. And I think that, you know, accepting somebody else having a different belief doesn't mean that you have less conviction in your belief. It can actually mean that you have enough conviction and that you're solid and secure enough within your own beliefs to let other people have their beliefs, I feel. So I think that's really important, and I think most pagans do have that understanding. And if you feel the same way as me, then high five. You know, I think that it's really important. There's enough people that kind of put us down and say that we're wrong without us doing it to each other. You know, we don't need to tell each other that we're wrong. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of tea. This cup says, "Pirates be warned." And I'm drinking green tea today. It's green tea with fragrant jasmine. It's very nice. So anyway, yeah, what else was I going to say? Yeah. I also wanted to touch on hard polytheism. And for a long time, I looked at other witches and pagans who were hard polytheists, and I really kind of envied them. And I had this idea that that was the real right way to be a witch, you know, to have to believe that your gods were real in and of themselves and existing independently, and to have this really direct connection with them where you could communicate with them very, very readily and just understand what they were saying to you really easily. And it's just not that way. That's not the way it is for everybody, you know. And I don't think that that's necessarily the only one and only right way to be a pagan or a witch. You know, for me, the divine communicates with me in a less direct way, you know. It puts synchronicities on my path for me to look at or to trip over sometimes. Like sometimes I'll get that 2x4 up the head where I'm like, oh, yep, that's the divine talking to me. And, you know, I communicate through divination and, you know, my tarot and oracle cards and that kind of thing. And to me, that's okay. And I am still a little bit envious of those hard polytheists who have that direct way of communicating with the divine. And I think that's okay. But, yeah, it's just not that way for everybody, and it's not the way that it is for me, unfortunately. But, yeah, tell me what you think below. I would love to know what you think of that idea of hard polytheists and having that really direct way of communicating with the divine, where you kind of just hear them talking to you and you know, yep, okay, that's Odin or that's whoever. You know, I'm fascinated by it. And I wish that that was how it was for me, but it's just not. You know, I tried to go, okay, talk to me, gods, and it's just crickets chirping. So, yeah. And I also saw a blog post not long ago, actually it was just the other day, and I'll link to it below, but it was about can deities be a fad? And specifically this gentleman was talking about the Morrigan. So a lot of people these days are drawn to the Morrigan, and she seems to be having an upsurge of popularity at the moment. Like, a lot of people are writing books about her and making blog posts, and yeah, a lot of people are working with the Celtic goddess of death in the underworld, the Morrigan. And he was just kind of discussing whether it can be, deities coming and going can be a fad, and I think he had a lot of interesting points, although I think there's a danger inherent in seeing deities as a fad, whereby you can kind of roll your eyes and going, oh, the Morrigan, and if you are called by the Morrigan, because of that kind of attitude, you could think to yourself, oh, well, you know, that's just me projecting because she's kind of in right now and she's the trend and she's the cool thing, and, you know, I'm just going to ignore it. And then you could be missing out on having that relationship and developing a really great rapport with the Morrigan if she's calling you, because you think that she's just a fad. And I actually have fallen into that myself in retrospect. There was actually one deity that was talked about in a book by an author who I didn't like at the time, and I thought, oh gosh, you know, she's kind of trendy by this author, so I kind of ignored this deity for a long time until I started receiving a lot of signs from them, and I knew that I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I had to pay attention. But yeah, I think that that you can be in danger of doing that, and it's really important to be aware of that, even if you do think that certain deities are just a fad that people are kind of getting into because it's cool and it's a craze. And also, when you are searching out different deities, if you are interested in working with specific deities, I think it's important to use your intellect as well as your intuition. And the Four Queens was talking about this in one of her videos about seeking out the divine, and I'll link to that one below as well if I can find it, because that was a really good video. But you know, we have both because we're meant to use both. We're meant to use both our mind and our conscious mind and our subconscious intuition. So I think that the two can work together, and you can't really discount one over the other when you are working with different deities. So yeah, that's another thing that you should be aware of, is that you can't discount, you know, if you are noticing things, and you might question whether or not it's just you projecting those ideas and thinking, oh, okay, well, is it just my mind, you know, my conscious mind that is drawn to this deity? And if it is a little bit of your conscious mind being drawn to a deity, then maybe that's okay. You know, it's no more or no less important than your subconscious. And, you know, if you keep finding references to a different deity in certain books and you're being drawn to this deity, maybe that's just as important as if you were having some really full-on kind of dreams and, you know, just really random encounters with these deities, you know. So that's another thing to think about as well. So yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I also wanted to touch a little bit on, you know, atheism and Satanism, and also Christo-paganism. And I think that all three of those things within pagan belief are kind of, you know, very controversial on and off. And first of all, you've got Satanism, which, you know, we've tried to say for years that witches don't worship the devil and that kind of thing. And I watched a really great video by someone, yeah, it was Mr. Shadowboy actually. He made a really great video on the devil and the historical association of witches with the devil. And we've tried for, you know, several decades now to try and assert that we don't have anything to do with the devil. And the fact of the matter is that some witches still do, and historically we always have. And you know, that can be really hard to come to terms with when we're trying to be seen as non-threatening and, you know, kind of accepted, publicly accepted, and just, you know, not losing our kids in court and not losing our jobs and that kind of thing. And I think there's a fine line. I was reading the article Rewilding Witchcraft. I know a lot of you have probably read it, but he kind of put forward the assertion that witchcraft today has kind of lost its teeth because of this struggle to be publicly accepted. And I think there's a fine line, you know. Witchcraft has historically been associated with some dark stuff, and it's never been about being publicly accepted, and it never will be. But I think it's hard as somebody who still wants to hold down a job, look after their kids when maybe they're separated from their previous partner who's the child's other parent and that kind of thing, and stuff like that, to be seen as accepted. And I think that's part of why the whitewash has occurred, of, you know, renouncing the evil stuff that witches have historically been associated with. So it's hard to say what is the right amount of accepting our shadow, I guess. And it is part of our shadow, this historical stuff, including Satan and the devil. And so yeah, Satanism is very controversial. And obviously Christo-pagan is, because, you know, there's people who just can't accept that. Some people would be pagan as well as also, you know, whatever the case may be, to whatever extent, you know, having a relationship with Jesus, going to church, reading the Bible, praying to Heavenly Father, etc., whilst also being a child of Mother Earth and revering the natural world and the earth as divine, as well as that Christian God. And some people just can't get their head around that, and that's fine. But I think I'm not going to say we have to be accepting, but maybe we need to just accept that it works for some people, and you may not agree with it, but it is what it is, kind of thing. Yeah, that probably that didn't come out as eloquently as I would have hoped, but I hope I made sense at least. And yeah, another thing that's controversial almost as much as Satanism and Christo-paganism is this idea of spiritual atheism. You know, some people think that that's a contradiction in terms, and somebody pointed out to me that you can't be both an atheist and a theist, and I can appreciate that, and I can really understand that, and I think that's true. But, you know, sometimes you can always struggle and question the different beliefs and philosophies and ideas that you've always had, and think maybe there really is no inherent divinity within anything. And for me, I think that there is inherent divinity. However, I don't know that it exists as this independently existing kind of conscious divinity. And for me, I feel like if you could prove to me unequivocally that there is no God whatsoever, and I don't think you could scientifically prove that, but if you could, I feel like there would still be sacredness, and there would still be the divine, and, you know, we'd still have the world all around us and our senses to perceive it with and that kind of thing. And to me, that is sacred and divine in and of itself. And a really good book to read on spiritual atheism is the book of Atheist Spirituality by Andre Comte-Sponville. I don't have a copy of it with me at present because I think I lent it out to someone. It may have been my mum. But it's a really good book. A little bit of a hard read, I think, mainly because the author is French, and it's been translated, so it can be a tough read in parts. But one of my favourite quotes from that book was a part where he said he kind of had this struggle when he realised that he was an atheist, between thinking like there is no God, so nothing matters, and then he kind of came to the realisation that there is no God, so everything matters. And I think that that's a really important distinction between just plain old atheism and spiritual atheism, is this idea that things are still sacred and divine, and that you still have a sense of awe and wonder and that kind of thing that's maybe not necessarily there with just atheism. Like, atheists can be quite skeptical and quite kind of pessimistic and nihilistic, I guess. Whereas with spiritual atheism, yeah, there's that sense of joy and wonder and stuff that I can really get down with. And I also really enjoy the work of, what's that guy's name? Richard Dawkins, that's right, Dickie Dawkins, how could I forget? But yeah, his stuff about the magic of reality and the magic of nature, I'm totally down with that stuff. I really enjoy it, and I think it's cool. However, am I an atheism? I've gotten to the point where I'm not an atheist, sorry. Blah, might be time to wrap this video up soon. But yeah, yeah, I'm not an atheist. I am very much a soft polytheist, as well as somewhat of a pantheist and an animist, and I am comfortable with seeing the divine as both feminine and masculine, although I don't think that that's the one and only right and true way for everybody. So yes, I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. I'm going to have a lot of linkage to do in the down bar of this video, but anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed listening to my thoughts. Sorry about the bad lighting, and sorry that I'm not done up to the nines, but okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!